Working Cows Podcast, episode 289.
This episode is brought to you by C90 Ocean Minerals.
Welcome to the podcast that gives producers a platform to discuss and share paradigm-challenging practices. Practices that have increased the effectiveness of their operation and the joy that their families have received from this lifestyle.
Howdy, everybody. This is Clay Connery, host of the Working Cows Podcast, recorded exclusively in the C90 Ocean Minerals studios. And this episode is brought to you by C90 Ocean Minerals. Want to grow healthier, more nutrient-dense food this season? Introducing C90's Growers Series, a new line of mineral and trace element products perfect for your home garden and homestead. Give C90 Growers Series a try and be amazed at the improved quality and taste of your fruits and vegetables. Tomatoes that taste like you remember growing up are possible again by ensuring that they have access to all of nature's macro and trace minerals. C90's Growers Series is also a powerful microbiology booster for compost and compost teas, dramatically increasing their strength and potency. C90 Growers Series is now available, and listeners of the Working Cows Podcast can receive 20% off the new lineup with code GROWCOWS, or visit us at c-90.com/growcows. Very excited to be joined today by Troy Hadrick. Been a long time since I first had Troy on, but Troy is a wealth of knowledge and really appreciate his perspective. And recently, him and his wife, Stacy, have embarked on an adventure to launch a new USDA-inspected beef, pork, and bison processing facility near their hometown of Faulkton, South Dakota. And so we're going to talk to Troy today about some of the things that he's learned in that process, some of their motivations for starting that process, and what his goals are, why they are doing this, and what they hope to, what the kind of the timeline they hope to be getting it done on. So really excited for this conversation. Troy, thanks for joining me again on the Working Cows Podcast. Welcome back.
Yeah, thanks, Clay.
I recently caught wind of an interesting project that you and Stacy have going on called Prairie Butchery. Could you tell me a little bit about the project and where you're at in the process, I guess?
Yeah, so we've been finishing some cattle for several years now, and you know, as everybody knows, things got a little dicey through COVID and whatnot, trying to get cattle processed and through the big plants, and it really came back and it was hard on us getting that through that, and it was kind of one of those things that caused you to step back and think to yourself, is there a different way? And so we and about that same time too, we developed a relationship with a couple of restaurants down in Sioux Falls. The guys that own Maury Steakhouse and Grill 26 and the original downtown Minerva's, started visiting with them about what it would take to get our beef into their restaurants. And they were, you know, having some of those same frustrations at the time about beef was hard to find and quite expensive, and so we started working with them, and that's been going really, really well, and we've really grown and developed that relationship. But now we've sort of come to this point where we have have the ability to grow, or the demand is out there, and getting cattle processed here in our region through an inspected facility and being able to, you know, kind of get through some numbers is pretty challenging. And so we set off to figure out what would it take and what would it look like if we built something. And basically what we did is we came up with this plan for building a 25 head per day federally inspected facility that would do custom harvesting and allow producers to help them start to do a little more direct beef sales and get some of that more done. So it's been quite a journey to get this far. It's quite a complicated thing, but we're pretty excited about what we've come up with.
Sure. And is that the itch that you're scratching in the marketplace, is the creating more margin for more people to be able to get access to processing slots in a USDA inspected facility?
Yeah, it really can. I mean, I think most of us have probably in the livestock industry have, probably fed out a few and sold it to some friends or neighbors, and or maybe you got hunters that come to your place in the fall and they maybe get some beef from you or whatnot. And, I ship some beef out to send some beef home with some cousins that live out in California every year. And, without a doubt and without exception, they always come back and talk about, wow, this just tastes different than what we're used to. And so there's definitely a demand for it, as people get a taste for that and really enjoy working with, directly with producers that, there is more margin there because you're not selling commodity beef into a giant system anymore. It's more one-on-one, and you can set a price and if you can get that price, that's good for you. And so I think it opens up a lot of opportunity. It's different than what we're used to, but it's definitely opportunity that can be taken advantage of.
Right. So in podcasting, one of the things that is kind of necessary for success is to know the niche that you're shooting at. Like we're aiming at a very specific target. It's not the radio where we're just shooting a shotgun approach, taking a wide angle approach. Most podcasts, or I think the successful podcasts, tend to be very much focused on a specific niche. And I think that that's kind of, if we want to compare two ways of getting beef to the market, the JBSs of the world, or whoever you want to say, Tyson, whoever is, they've got the shotgun approach of getting as much beef processed and out to as many people as possible. And their competitive advantage is scale and the ability to use every single piece of that animal and not have anything really go to waste. Whereas in a smaller market like you are talking about developing, you've got the ability to actually have some of those relationships with the end consumer of your product, and exactly who you're shooting at. Would you agree with that as kind of a good proxy for what you're doing?
Yeah, no doubt. And I think, as an industry, every time we run into hard times, we start to think of what's that wide angle shotgun approach, right? Like we talk about, we need to, completely redo the industry. We need to build more big plants. And we stepped back and said, I don't know that us as individuals can tackle, changing and revolutionizing the entire industry. But what can we do in our little corner of the world? What is that niche? And, as we looked around and as we were trying to grow and change our business a little bit with some direct sales, there was nobody out there filling that niche. We can get to a few different plants. We travel 150 to 250 mile round trips to access them. We do 3 or 4 at a time, usually. You gotta make another trip back, you get the meat. So those aren't things that are very conducive to wanting to jump into that. So that's, as we looked at it, said that's where maybe our niche is, and that's maybe the thing that we can change is let's build a facility that has enough size to chew through some numbers, and would allow you to bring a trailer load at least if you're traveling a little bit of a distance, and you can get your own meat back and do it yourself. The other opportunity we have is, as we've looked at growing our own direct sales, and we've turned down a fair amount of restaurant business in the last year, as people say, oh, hey, you've got something figured out and you're having some success, and we'd like to get some too. And we have to turn that down because we just don't have that processing capacity out there to utilize to make that happen. And so so those were the things that said, let's go and fill that niche. Let's build this thing that we wished we had, and we wished that somebody else would have built, and make it, doing little things to make it more convenient for the producers, such as, being able to deliver cattle in the afternoons instead of having to be there at daybreak in the mornings, offering to do custom labeling on your meat, things like that can really set it apart. And so we're excited to bring that to market and hopefully help some folks build on their own brands.
who's your customer? I mean, we talk about knowing as a cow-calf producer, we talk about knowing who your customer is, or maybe as somebody who's finishing a few head, on the ranch or on the farm feedlot. Knowing who your customer is an important thing. So who is North Prairie Butchery's customer? Who are you guys shooting at as far as bringing you beef?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because we've got a few different customers, and it depends which door of the plant you're looking at. So as you're looking at the front of the plant, our customer is going to be, and the front door is probably going to be consumers who are looking to buy beef locally. They can come into our retail store, access that. It would be restaurants or retailers that are looking to carry some locally grown food, locally raised beef in their businesses. And so we want to help those folks to get that, give them more access to that. On the backside of the plant where the trailers pull up, our customers there are the guys that, like you said, are finishing some cattle at home that they're going to either consume themselves or maybe sell to some friends or neighbors, or maybe they're trying to do some online sales of the beef they raise. I think first and foremost, we really want to do as much of that custom work as is out there, just because, as we talk locally, that's the thing we all talk about is how difficult it is to get that done. So we'd really like to first and foremost fill that need as best we can. And then we know at 25 head a day, we're not going to be doing, 25 head of custom cattle every day. And so we're going to be looking to buy some market ready cattle as well, and looking to find those cattle that will grade well. Right now, our markets for the beef that we've developed are on that high quality end. I mean, we're talking stuff that's grading prime, high choice. And so we'd like to find more of those cattle and build those labels and pay back those premiums to the folks that can provide those cattle to us. And so we've got different customers, depending on which door of this facility you're looking at. But being able to, have that customer service on both ends of that, it's going to be really important to making this successful.
Do you think that this is a model that needs to be replicated in other places around the country, in other places around the state even, as far as just opening up those smaller places that have that across state lines capability and some of those things?
As you look at what we've just come through over the last few years, especially in the beef industry, on the processing side of things, what we've realized is we don't have any redundancy in our processing end. If one of our big plants goes down, whether it's COVID or a fire or you name it, right? I mean, the shock waves reverberate out, and it literally takes months to absorb that slack that showed up in the chain. And it's felt on the producer side of things, it's felt on the consumer side. And so that to me is where we struggle. We can never afford to have one of those. We're so tight on our efficiency that we can't afford to have one of those go down. So how do you take that back? I don't think in my mind it's trying to build 3 or 4 or 5 more big plants that do 3,000 head a day or 6,000 head a day. Those are super expensive to build. They take an immense amount of labor, an immense amount of resources, and there's very few places where you can build those. But there's a lot of places in rural America where you could build a 25 head per day facility, just like we're looking at doing, and it would fill a little local regional niche. It would add some redundancy to the system. Would create some new opportunities that aren't there currently. And I just feel like that, if you look at some other industries, you look at ethanol, some of those first ethanol plants were built, and now look how many there are in these little communities, right? And what if we imagine every time you see an ethanol plant, there was a little 15 to 50 head livestock processing facility, and how that would change our opportunity to reach out and get some stuff done. So I think there's a huge new way to think about things as we move forward, of maybe chasing that last penny of efficiency isn't the way to go anymore. Maybe it's more about let's add some redundancy. Let's make some more regional and local opportunities for processing, and not be shipping stuff so far all the time.
If you've heard Temple Grandin talk anytime in the last few years, she's talked about big is fragile, right? That those big plants, when they go down, it's a big, like you were just talking about, 3,000 head a day, 6,000 head a day. That's a big hiccup in the system. And so how do we get past that? And if they're down for multiple days or a week or whatever, it doesn't take very long before you're looking at 50,000 head of cattle that were ready to be processed on that day. And now we're going to be experiencing losses as far as, they're going to be overfinished in some of those things or whatever the case might be. And so I think that kind of what you're talking about is more of an anti-fragile system, to borrow another. Nicholas Nassim Taleb talks about being anti-fragile. It's not resilient, because resilient just talks about how long before it actually breaks, but it's anti-fragile. It's distributed. It's, well, this 25 head place is down today, but there's another one county over and we can get in there, or whatever the case might be. So I think that it is something that is a boon to the industry if we could get more of these distributed throughout the country.
It really is. I mean, we found out just how fragile we were during COVID. I mean, all of a sudden, cattle had no place to go. It was worse on the hog side of things. And we were just digging pits and pushing them in on that side. And then consumers at the same time were struggling to find food on the grocery store shelf. And that's a really eye-opening situation when we're wasting resources on our end, and we're, and we got other people that are starving for resources on the other side. And there's just this hourglass shape that we're fighting with, that skinny little spot in the middle. And we know what's there, I mean, if something would happen again, like it's happened over the last few years, it's not going to be a surprise anymore. And so let's do something about it. And I think this, I've never heard the term anti-fragile, but I'm liking that a lot now, because I think that's kind of what we're looking for. Let's do what we can in our little corner of the world. And that'll be a lot easier to tackle than trying to eat this elephant all in one bite. And so we're excited about it. And I think that as we grow those relationships with the restaurants and stuff, I mean, they've really gotten excited about it. They love being able to tell that story. I mean, the idea of food with a story, I know sometimes we talk about it a lot, and sometimes maybe it makes you kind of throw up in your mouth a little, and maybe we get tired of it, but it's true. I mean, and it's just a matter of, people are interested in what we do. People are interested in hearing about how we raise cattle. They just kind of want to know what's going on, not because they want to tell us what to do most of the time. Most of the time, they're just generally curious, and they're maybe even slightly jealous of the lifestyle that we do have. And so this really helps to grow some of that.
Yeah, a couple of illustrations of that point. First one is probably more something people can connect with, but do you trust the horse you bought off of Craigslist more than you trust the horse you bought from your neighbor? Be honest, right? And people want a story with their food. And here's the one that probably maybe people won't connect with. I'm a huge nerd, so I'm not afraid to admit it, but I love Antique Roadshow. And the stuff that goes for the most on Antique Roadshow is the stuff that has a story with it. The stuff that you can tell them, this was hanging on my wall. I watched it one night. This guy had a gun that had been hanging on his wall since it was his grandpa's house, and then he inherited the house, and he's now living in it. And he says, I never knew a time when this gun wasn't hanging on the wall in our house. And he took it down, took it to Antique Roadshow, told them that story. And they said, yeah, that story, this gun and that story together are worth $60,000, because it was from the Kentucky Green Mountain Boys. It was one of the guns that was used by them. So, but what makes antiques worth more is the story that's connected to them. If you have the provenance, if you've got the documentation, and you can tell a family story about how it got to where it is now, it makes those things worth more. And I think that the beef is the same way. That if you've got fewer degrees of separation between the end consumer and the producer of that critter, there's more. It probably doesn't change the end consumer's price tag that much, but it changes the dollars coming back to the producer quite a bit, I think.
Yeah, it really does. And I mean, you think about every time a load of calves leaves your community, and what that could change if you were able to keep them there for longer and really go directly to that. So that's been our goal, is to try and change them. We've seen that opportunity there. We're trying to take advantage of it ourselves, but we've got to turn these cattle into beef somehow. And, those facilities just aren't there. And, and that's, I think the reason they're not there is because it was too efficient for so many decades to ship those calves, to get them to a big feed yard and let them go through a big plant when they got to harvest weight. And the little guys, the little plants around here, just, there was not a lot of incentive for them to, modernize or to keep up and maintain what they had. And then the industry changes. A lot of these big plants even struggle with the size of cattle we're raising today. And so, it's a good chance for us to build a new facility, with an understanding of where we're at, in the industry today and what consumers are looking for. And so we're going to be able to offer, we're going to be able to do beef, pork, and bison. We've got some bison herds around that we'd like to, hopefully help those guys out too, as they're looking for some places to get some of them harvested. We're going to be able to do wet aging, do dry aging. We're going to have two smokehouses in there, so we can do jerky and meat sticks and summer sausages and just really try to be, not that we're trying to be everything to everybody, but to be kind of that full service shop that can do a lot of things. And whatever you're looking for in either your custom processing or whatever you're looking for as a consumer. We can do that, and we can put a custom label on it. We can do vacuum packaging. We can do roll stock packaging, whatever that is. And so we would like to be that small shop that does a really good job.
And I think that's kind of the goes back to the name, right? North Prairie Butchery. And we've lost that butcher in a lot of scenarios, in a lot of towns. We've lost that butcher skill set and that place where you could go and get all these things that you're talking about in one place. And so I think that's kind of part of what you guys are doing, is recreating that space that used to exist in a lot of places. And so I guess, talk to me about that. I think you're a ways from finding labor, right? As far as the journey is concerned, you guys are still kind of in the fundraising journey with that. Is that right?
That's correct. Yep. So we've built the model. We've got a floor plan. We've got a business plan. We've got, all of our financial projections in place, best we can in this environment. So where we're at, how we're going to do this is Stacy and I are going to be financing the construction of the plant. And we were fortunate enough, we were one of 21 projects across the United States that was selected for a USDA meat and poultry processing expansion program grant. And we have been so we got about $2.2 million from them to help with construction, but it's a pretty good sized project. We're looking at about a $13.5 million plant. So, but besides that, we are going to need some other support to help get this going. And we would appreciate, having some conversations with other producers or, community-minded people that look at this and say, this is something that really needs to happen, and talk to you about some opportunities that there are to support this project. And because it is going to take a bit of a team. And I feel like Stacy and I have kind of pulled this together about as far as we can at this point. And now we need all the rest of the, folks that have said to themselves at some point, boy, what we need, is some of the more processing capacity in our region. Wouldn't it be nice to have that? Well, here's your chance to step up and help make that happen. And so Stacy and I are going to be able to do quite a bit of the lifting on this project, but we do need some help. And if you go to northprairiebutchery.com, you can see all of our information on there. And a lot of this is just having a lot of one-on-one conversations. And just like, every ranch is unique and every operation's unique. And so the best way to sort of visit about this is with a lot of one-on-one conversations to talk about things that maybe you've thought of trying to do with some of your cattle. let's talk about what we're going to be able to offer and how those things could work together. And so it takes more time to do it that way, right? To have lots of conversations instead of a giant meeting at the Holiday Inn or something. But we feel like this is the best way to put together a facility and a business that can really make a difference for a lot of families.
What does your investor look like then, as far as somebody who's willing to invest? Do they need to be from South Dakota? Do they need to be from your neighborhood? Or what are you guys looking at as far as investment is concerned?
No, there isn't any need for that. Our supporters can be really from anywhere. And so, I used to think I would drive quite a ways if there was a spot where I could have taken, you say, a full trailer load of market ready cattle to go get them harvested and get all that meat back and be able to direct market it. And so we kind of want to be that plant. So, we really feel like we're going to be drawing in some folks from a ways away, maybe a few 100 miles even, just because of what we can offer and how we can handle those cattle and get your product back to you. So, right now, the supporters that we've gotten it's really a mix of everything. It's folks that see this just as a good opportunity and want to find out how to be a part of it, or folks that have livestock and want to figure out how this can be part of their business going forward. So sky's kind of the limit there.
And, to that end, where are you? Where will North Prairie Butchery be located and some of those things?
Sure. So we've got a spot picked out. It's just 1 mile east of Faulkton, South Dakota. And if you're not familiar with that, Faulkton's kind of in north central part of the state, sits right on Highway 212. So Highway 212 stretches from Minneapolis to Yellowstone National Park. Got the Missouri River there in the middle, and lots of folks use that highway as a kind of an east-west route. And we certainly see lots of boats and campers going by in the summertime headed out to the river. And so we've got a few years ago, our community put together a little industrial park here, and we've got a spot out there that we're going to take up. We have 3-phase power out there. We have rural water out there. We can tie into the city lagoon for some of our wastewater, and new fiber, highway access, really all the things that you could really want in a location. And so we're excited about that spot. I'll brag a little bit that our community of Faulkton is fairly progressive community. In fact, there's a brand new hardware store out right next to where we're going to build our facility. We've got a brand new school. We've got a hospital that's maybe only 10, 12 years old, but it's been added on to a couple of times. We've got a great medical facility there. A lot of new amenities in our community. And so we're excited to add another one and really help this region grow.
Well, it sounds like you're pitching for butchers that want to move to Faulkton and do the work there. So good place to move a family.
And we're very fortunate. We do have an operations manager. We've got him hired. We're excited about that. A guy that's been looking to get back to South Dakota, him and his family. And so we're excited to get them back home and get him set up here. And he's got an amazing skill set, a guy that can really help make this a success. And so, I think anytime you're looking at something this big, obviously it's not, Stacy and I that are going to know everything we need to know about this. And we knew that from the beginning. So that's when you need to make sure you got a good team put together. And feel like we've done that. We've had professionals that have helped us develop the feasibility study and the business plans. We didn't just we never pulled numbers out of the air. It was all from research and then the same way when it comes to once we get this built and get it going, like we need good folks that know what they're doing and want to live in a great little community here. And so we're excited to put that all together and kick out a good product.
Let's take a quick break and hear a word from our sponsor today. And this episode is brought to you by C90 Ocean Minerals. Want to grow healthier, more nutrient-dense food this season? Introducing C90's Growers Series, a new line of mineral and trace element products perfect for your home garden and homestead. Give C90 Growers Series a try and be amazed at the improved quality and taste of your fruits and vegetables. Tomatoes that taste like you remember growing up are possible again by ensuring that they have access to all of nature's macro and trace minerals. C90's Grower Series is also a powerful microbiology booster for compost and compost teas, dramatically increasing their strength and potency. C90 Growers Series is now available, and listeners of the Working Cows podcast can receive 20% off the new lineup with code GROWCOWS, or visit us at c-90.com/growcows.
Yeah, I don't know many people that I've met personally that would probably know more about the beef industry as a whole, from cow-calf through to end consumer than you, honestly. I know that's saying a lot, but given your experience with just on the ranch, and given your experience with finishing your own cattle, and given your experience of sending them off to be finished, and YF&R, National YF&R Committee, and all those things, all the experiences that you've had, I think that you've learned a lot about this industry through those experiences. So I guess my question is, what have you learned through this experience that you didn't know maybe as tangibly as you did before you started down this journey?
Well, a lot is the quick answer, as you might expect. But I'll tell you right at the get-go is we were just sort of looking at this maybe a little bit selfishly. We said, well, what would we have to build to sort of take care of our own needs for getting livestock processed, and maybe do a few others, but mostly, let's take care of us first. And so we thought to ourselves, maybe a 5 head a day plant, maybe it's their 20 a week, something along those lines, maybe a touch bigger than what's available now, but at least it'd be closer to home. And so as we found a group called Food and Livestock Planning, which is Dr. Keith DeHaan's group, South Dakota kid, SDSU Jackrabbit guy. We worked with him and his team to put together some models. And so they did exactly what we told them to. And they said, here you go, here's your 5 head a day deal. And the feasibility said this is going to be a train wreck. And so, okay, good. Well, at least we know that's not going to work. So what will work? And that's when we had to start exploring, it needed to be a little bit bigger. And so we looked at 25 head a day. We looked at 50 head a day. We looked at 100 head a day. What all that takes. And obviously, as you get a little bit bigger, kind of going back to what we talked about earlier, you pick up some efficiencies. But there were some things that would go with it too that we just couldn't handle in our spots, in our community, just with the resources we had. And so 25 head a day was really the sweet spot for us, that looked like it was manageable from a size standpoint and a resources standpoint. And let us still, I would argue, kind of chew through some numbers, if you will, kick out enough volume to kind of make a difference. And so that's kind of where we landed there. So, that was some of the first and biggest learning steps. We had an opportunity to travel to a few different places, look at some plants that were kind of in the same size range as what we were looking at, and saw some things we liked and saw some things that we said, man, we don't want to do that. And that's probably even more important, is to find those things. And so those were all great experiences. And then, then after that, it's a lot of money, and it's a big project, and there's lots of moving parts, and everything from having the environmental impact studies done to learning how to work on the financial side of things to put a project this big together. I wish I'd never heard of the word capital stack, but when you start to need to put together a big pot of money, then you learn that term real quick, and you got to start going forward with that. So certainly I've learned a lot. But I think it was, and I, thank you for the compliment. I appreciate that. But, I think it goes back to some of these experiences we have had, and just, I'd tell you, it goes all the way back to my days at South Dakota State University, being on the meats judging team, and learning right then that, boy, there's every calf that we raise out here in the country ends up hanging on that rail somewhere, and somebody has to eat it. And a lot of times we're pretty wrapped up in what we do on the ranch, and that's okay, and you need to do that. But you also have to be aware that somebody's got to eat that thing some point, and you should want them to enjoy that, and it should be a good experience. And what can we do to continue to, improve that? And so from that experience on, I really learned, I guess that became my mindset, and wanted to always be keeping that, as part of the plan, is how do we improve that end eating experience? And I think now we've kind of come full circle, and this is just an extension of stuff I learned 25, pushing 30 years ago now.
Yeah, for sure. I think that it says something too about the mindset. Like, we recognize a problem and we don't just blame somebody else for the problem that exists, right? We go out and we try to fix it. We try to create something that will fix the problem. And I mean, you're welcome to comment on that if you want to, but I think that's really an important thing in agriculture especially, is because there is probably always somebody that you could blame if you wanted to for the problems that you're facing. But it's, at the end of the day, probably none of us has the tools to fix those problems necessarily. Even if they are to blame for some of our issues, but the mindset of, well, I can't do much about that, so I'm not going to waste a lot of energy on doing it. I'm going to go out and try and figure out something else that I can make work. Would you agree with that?
That's really what it boils down to. And that was going to be my comment is, I mean, you've got so much energy during the day, and the older you get, probably the worse it gets. You start to want to go to bed a little bit earlier. And so as we looked at this, and it's like, yeah, do we spend our time and energy complaining and being mad? I mean, I could, I just don't think it was going to get me anywhere. And so, I guess just me personally, and, my wife the same way, we kind of like to dream, like, well, what would it take to not have that problem in our life? And what is that solution? And I think that's, I guess I would argue that's a better mindset to have. I mean, it's easy to complain, but I just have never been able to see that it ever gets us very far down the road. And so that's what we set off to do. I've always said, if you don't like parts of our industry, whether it's the packing industry, or if you're mad at the retailers for charging too much, or whoever it is, maybe you don't like the feedlots because they don't pay enough for your calves, then figure out how to work around it. I mean, nobody's holding a gun to your head and saying you have to do it this way all the time and just be a taker. And I don't like being a price taker. I'd like to be more of a price maker. I think that's gives you an opportunity to do a little more in this industry and survive a little bit better. And just doing it the way Grandpa always did it, I don't think is going to be the path forward for us being able to pass it on to the sixth generation here. So we've got to continue to evolve. We've got to continue to come up with new ideas and find better ways. And is it easy? No. Is it uncomfortable sometimes? Heck yeah. Do you got to make lots of phone calls and talk to lots of people and find some solutions and be creative? Absolutely. So I know maybe that's some people don't like to do that, and that some days I like to do it and some days I don't like to do it. Some days I wish all I had to do was worry about going out and feeding and, getting back to the house and have a cup of coffee. But I don't think that's the path forward for our industry at this point, and especially for our own business. So we've kind of chosen to do something different.
Choose your hard, right? It's hard.
Yeah.
Everything's hard, but I mean, like, not passing the ranch on to the sixth generation, that's hard. So what do we have to do to make sure
hard.
what do we have to do to make sure that happens? Choose your heart and do that, because it's all going to be hard. There's no easy. There's no easy.
No.
And or at least not easy that lets you keep your integrity. So there's choose your heart and go and do that, I think is part of it. So are there regulations that would prevent a North Dakota guy coming 100 miles south to have his cattle processed? Is that going against that USDA thing too? So we have to have a USDA facility for him to bring cattle down, or not?
No, that'll be perfectly fine. Probably all they'd have to do in that instance where you're crossing the state line is probably have a health paper on them. But after that, we don't have any issues. So being a federally inspected facility, once those cattle come through, or hogs or bison, whatever they are, that meat can go anywhere in the U.S. without any issues. And so that's kind of another thing that, we've had a lot of people ask, well, are you going to be federally inspected or state inspected? And for us, you just need to go straight to federal, just to get rid of that barrier. This is too much work and too big a facility to put together and still have a barrier at the end that we can't cross the state line. So,
Right.
I know it's kind of the federal inspection and state inspection system is kind of goofy. There's no reason for that redundancy, and there's no, our state inspections equal to or greater than federal, but then you still can't cross a line on the map with your meat. So it is what it is. Some people are fighting that. Great. We're just going to get a federal inspector and not worry about it.
Yeah. And so that's what I'm asking, though, like, without a federally inspected plant, can a North Dakota guy bring cows to South Dakota, have them processed? Or do you know how?
Oh, yeah. I mean, yeah, you could come down if it weren't federally inspected. It's not, the cattle, but then
they have to stay there in South Dakota to be sold, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, if you're taking it home for your own personal consumption, that'd be fine, but you couldn't buy it there, or we couldn't ship it back to you. It would cause some issues. And so here again, let's break down those barriers before they become an issue.
Right. So, and the other thing is that we don't, as cow-calf guys, beef guys, we don't get into this business because we like dealing with people. And so a lot of these direct-to-consumer marketing programs end up being a lot of people dealing with a lot of people. So would you say that you're also serving the niche of the guy who wants to have his beef locally processed, but not necessarily take it all the way to shaking the hand that he's feeding necessarily?
Yeah, I mean, that will be one option. We'll be buying some cattle, 25 a day. That's over 6,000 a year. That's a pretty decent sized number to chew through. So we'll be looking to buy some cattle to, keep our rail full. We'll probably be developing a couple of labels that we can put that under that will, reflect quality and then also, reflect origin. But yeah, if we're able to get some calves from you, and then you kind of know, we'll be sending that data back to you. You can see how well they hung. You'll know where your beef's going. And so you're not going to, personally take it to the end, but you know where it's going to end up per se. And that's for a lot of guys, that would be a big step. It was, I know what that was like when we started retained ownership for the first time, and that was a big step. And so it gives you an opportunity to get closer. And maybe after doing that for a little while, and then maybe you become more comfortable with it and you learn a little bit more. And I think that's something, we haven't hit on yet today, but the education thing, if you haven't been around the beef side of the business much, or, if you haven't been into some big plants and seen carcasses hanging and understand the grading system and the inspection system and, what some of that stuff looks like and how to break, just even fabricating a carcass. Where do these cuts come from and where do they, how are they used? There's going to be certainly some education on our end that we're going to try and provide for folks that are interested in learning more. We have in our floor plan, we've intentionally put windows into all of our rooms so we can take folks and, just wouldn't have to gown up per se and to go onto the floor of some of those rooms, but could watch through the window and see that process and get an idea how things work. And our hope is that we can share that with lots of people and let them see a little bit and learn a little bit. And then, if we're getting some cattle from you and maybe they don't grade as well as you hoped, or maybe that was the first time you even ever did get carcass data. And now you're like, okay, that's great. Let's continue to improve. Our goal is to have a system set up or some education there ready for you and say, okay, if you'd like to improve that, here's some folks you need to talk to. Here's some options for you to consider and kind of help you out that way. So it's, the better we can do, the better the cattle are that come into the plant, the better that the markets that we develop for the beef, the better job that we do as processing, the better that we all do as a team on this thing, we'll all benefit. And so we don't want to be a it's some sort of secret society, that stuff comes in the back and goes out the front. Nobody knows what happens in the middle. We're trying to try and be pretty open about that and share information and try and so we can all benefit from it.
Yeah, I think that's really neat. That's a really good strategy. I've sat in a few different rooms with your sister-in-law, Dr. Amanda Blair, and she's talked about the quality of cattle that we raise in this neighborhood. As far as kind of the northwest part of the country, and that it typically outpaces the rest of the country. No offense to the rest of the country. I think with good stockmanship, all cattle can be better than the neighbor's cattle. If you've got good stockmanship and are handling them well and taking good care of them, they'll do better than other people's in the neighborhood. But I do think there's something about our environment that produces good cattle. And so I think that we're leaving some money on the table if we're just approaching it every head that we produce, if we're approaching every head that we produce as a commodity type beef. And so I think that there's some opportunities created there with this facility that people are going to want to take advantage of. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you hit it spot on there. And the closer you can get to the consumer, I know this is kind of a cliche and everybody knows it, right? The closer you get to the consumer, the more dollars there are there to capture. Now, the caveat to that is, every kernel of corn sort of looks the same when you put it in a great big pile at the co-op. Not every beef carcass looks the same when it's hanging on the rail. So it doesn't happen automatically based off the zip code they're born in. But you're exactly right. Right. If you're a good stockman, you do the right things, you got a good health program, good nutrition program, you're setting yourself up for success. And if you're going to put into that good work and the extra effort that maybe some don't, you ought to get paid for it. And that's just a matter of making sure at the end that you market it in a way so you can get paid for it. And that's the outlet that we want to provide, and give some options there for you. So we, when we're looking at buying cattle, like I've said, if you're going to bring those cattle to us, we're going to basically buy them. We'd like to buy them from you on a grid. That way we're both paying the right amount. If you're going to bring us good cattle, you deserve to get paid more. And if you're bringing us some cattle that we can't, get into some of these higher end restaurants, then they are a little bit lesser value. But now we know that those are there in your herd, and now we can address that situation and try and prevent it in the future. So there's a lot of win-wins out there, I think, to be had. People just sort of need to open their mind and think about what are some other options for marketing that maybe we haven't utilized in the past that we should start to consider in the future.
So far, I've got two more questions before we point towards wrapping up. But what are some of the things and this probably deserves a whole episode in itself, and I'm fully aware of that, but what are some of the things that you've learned about the best ways to select which cattle are going to go to the rail and which ones are just going to get sold through, Mobridge Livestock or whatever, wherever you're going with your commodity, so to speak, beef?
Yeah, first and foremost, it really boils down to genetics. If cattle don't have the genetic ability to marble, then it doesn't matter how good your nutrition program is or how good your health program is. If their genetics won't allow that to happen, it's not going to happen. So first and foremost, you have to have that genetic ability in those cattle to reach that point. So that's how do you do that? Well, then it's finding those good genetics. And for us, it was implementing an artificial insemination program. And since 2012 now, every cow on the place gets a straw semen in her first. And then we turn out cleanup bulls after that. So I would say it's not a super intense program that we have. We're not picking up repeats and doing those things. We're giving them one shot and going forward from there. But that allows us to do a couple things. One, it really helps us to, tighten up our calving groups, allows us to, shorten that window, which is nice. It also allows us to really buy genetics then that are proven, have been used in different environments, sometimes in different countries, And we've got data, it's good, solid data. We've got genomic data. We've got actual data on some of those calves coming out of those sires. And then we know we've got this proven commodity working with. I'm the last guy that ever wants to use the new hot bull coming out of the Denver stock show. My goal is to let somebody else try that new hot bull. And because I don't, in my experience, not every one of them stays hot forever. Sometimes we find out that maybe, as we peel the layers of the onion back, maybe they weren't the best bull in the bunch that day. So we're trying to use some, I would say, proven genetics that have a few years of data behind them, and just avoid the mistakes. Just really avoid the mistakes. And so if you're not, if you don't have the ability or just don't know how you would implement an artificial insemination program, then it's wherever you're going to buy bulls. Make sure you talk to those guys that are raising those bulls and tell them, hey, this is my goal. Here's what's really important for me. There's a few things on our list when we're picking out sires that it's, there's sometimes we have flexibility and sometimes there's hard lines that we draw and just say, 9 out of 10 of the things we're looking for is really good, but you flunked on the one, and it's a non-starter for us. And so, but go talk to those guys, tell them what your goals are, tell them what you want to do, and have them help you walk through it. And if you don't feel like you got a good answer, then you need to push forward and find someplace else that you can go. So first and foremost, get that done. And then, as you get those genetics put into your herd, then it goes back to the basics, like we've already talked about: good stockmanship, of good health programs. The data is really clear that, a calf that gets sick even one time in their life, it's going to have an effect on that end result, even if it's 10 months later or a year later. So we got to keep those cattle as healthy as we can every day of the year. It's not a thing at the end that you just start worrying about. So some simple things like that they seem simple on the surface. I know they require effort, but that's what it takes to get it done.
Yeah. And I think that one of the things that I've learned over the course of this podcast, and don't hold Troy responsible for what I'm about to say, but not every black-hided bull is a maternal sire. Some of them, just because they're a black-hided bull on a black-hided cow, they're still a terminal sire. And so in this regard, that is a good thing, right? We are shooting towards a cattle that'll finish well, that'll grade well, that'll marble well, and we want that. We want that terminal type sire. Now, if we're trying to raise replacement females, or we're trying to raise cattle that can do well out on the range and require little to no supplementation, that's probably a different bull than we're looking at for the one that's going to go and perform well on the rail. So I think that's something to think about. And I think goes back to, like I said, don't blame Tro for what I'm saying, but goes back to kind of what you're saying about genetics and some of those things.
Yeah.
So, so I guess some last question as we point towards wrapping up. We've already covered kind of where people could go if they're interested in investing. NorthPrairieButchery.com. That'll be linked in the show notes page for today, workingcows.net/289. You can go there and find those links. But I guess my question is, do you have any way of predicting a timeline here? Do you have any sense of what that looks like going forward?
Yeah. So,
this is Troy's least favorite question, right?
Yeah. Right. Yeah. I'll happy to tell you the answer and then don't hold me to it. Right. But, we're still quite hopeful that we could get some construction started yet this construction season. So, into this summer moving forward, and get going into the fall for sure. So, we've got a few things in the works, as far as all the financing goes, that we feel like we're getting close. Everything moves slower than you like, but we're closer than we've ever been. So that's the good news. And everything continues to trend the right direction. And so that's the even better news. So hopefully we'd be doing some construction done yet this summer. And then we're looking at probably a 10 to 12 month construction window to get it completed. Some of the supply chain issues are still out there. Some of the equipment that we know we're going to need, there's some longer lead times on that still. And so We're prepared for some curveballs to get thrown our way when it comes to a few of those things. But ideally, sometime in 2024, hopefully in the summer, or at least for sure a little later into the 2024, we could be up and going. So a lot of things got to come together yet, but we're getting this put together. And honestly, the thing that will make that happen and keep that timeline on schedule is us finding enough people that say, you know what, this looks like a business that we want to be involved in, a business that could help our own personal goals and our farm and ranch, and want to be part of our team to help it go. So the quicker we can get all that done, the better off we'll be, and we'll have North Prairie Butchery up and running sooner rather than later.
Very good. Troy, anything else that I missed today? Anything else that needs to be said with regard to North Prairie Butchery?
I think the main thing I just want to emphasize, and you kind of said, most of us don't like talking to people, right? We're more comfortable with the cows than we are people. But what I would say is this is a big project, lots of moving parts, lots of different opportunities that it could present to lots of folks. So if you I would really encourage people to get onto northprairiebutchery.com. You'll see my cell phone number on there. My wife's number's on there as well. Give one of us a call. Let's just have a conversation, a visit. And maybe this isn't for you. Maybe this won't work into your future plans on your farm or ranch, but just give us a chance to have that conversation. Let's share a little bit about what we're doing and let your mind dream a little bit. This is I think one of the things that COVID, maybe the good things that came out of COVID, is it gave us the chance to say, what if we did it differently? What other options are out there? Do we need to continue what we've always done, or could we let ourselves dream a little bit about doing something differently? And if you kind of let yourself do that, it's pretty liberating, and it's fun. And I think you'll enjoy that exercise and just learning and making sure that as much information as possible about what we're doing here can maybe help you along as you're having those thoughts. So please reach out to us. Let's have a visit, and we'll kind of go from there.
Very good. Troy, thanks for your time today.
Yeah, thanks, Clay.
Very good stuff there. Really appreciate Troy and his perspective. And as I said, kind of his knowledge of the beef industry as a whole, from conception to consumption. Had a really neat opportunity to capture some of his story. They went through quite an ordeal in relation to Michael Pollan's book, Omnivore's Dilemma, and an article in the New York Times way back in the early 2000s. And so I had an opportunity for the bonus content for this episode to capture some of that. So if you're interested in that, be sure to check that out at patreon.com/workingcows. Coming up next week on the Working Cows podcast, very excited to be joined by Dr. Larry Tranel. Larry is he works a lot with dairy producers for the University of Iowa, but a friend of the show and a former guest of the show, Aaron Helmick, pointed me in Larry's direction, and we're going to focus on mental health. That's another about half of what Larry does for the University of Iowa Extension is dealing with mental health issues for agriculture producers. So we will see you again real soon with another episode of the Working Cows podcast.
We invite you to visit workingcows.net to subscribe to the show via iTunes or Stitcher. You'll also find detailed show notes pages, resources from our guests, and the industry leaders who have influenced them. For more ideas on putting your cows to work for you in a more profitable way, tune in next week.